each individual that's on your team has their individual talents, their individual weaknesses that they need to work on, their individual strengths. The best leaders are able to look at those people and be able to draw out the best from them.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Heart Inspired, the show dedicated to highlighting individuals in their pursuit of authentic leadership. We peel back the layers to uncover the roadblocks we all face, explore the actions we can take, and how to persevere towards the best version of ourselves. It is my hope that you'll be inspired by their story and gain some insights to help you in your own journey. Joe Templin is the managing director of the Unique Minds Consulting Group and is the author of Everyday Excellence. He has invested the past 2.5+ decades helping others reach their financial potential as a planner, trainer, mentor, and creator. Joe acknowledges his ADD and what he does to keep things in order. He enjoys running Ragnars, which is approximately 200-mile team relay races, ultra marathons. This made total sense when I asked Joe how long it took to write Everyday Excellence. The answer may surprise you. Please welcome my guest, Joe Templin. Hi, Joe. How are you?
I'm doing awesome, Michelle. I'm looking forward to this conversation. This will be
me too.
Fun and informative.
Yes, me too. You know, when we talked and you shared a little bit about your story and your journey, I just thought it was perfect timing because we're talking about diversity and how it impacts leadership and how it impacts working in the workplace. And so without giving away your story, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can share with the audience. So tell us a little bit about your journey and your family.
My journey is I'm the second of 6 kids. My mom, the nun. Yes, my mom was a nun. And my dad was a military guy. My mom obviously left the nunnery before she had the 6 of us. And my dad built a consulting business. My mom was a teacher. So anybody who hears that little bit of backstory understands me a lot better because I reflect those influences in a lot of things that I do. I've got 3 sons. My oldest is almost 18 years old. My middle guy is almost 16, and my little guy just turned 12. I refer to them as my hooligans because they definitely are, because they are my children. My oldest is Asperger's and bipolar. My supposedly neuronormal middle one is actually my biggest headache because he is too much like me and he's completely fearless. And my little guy is ADHD and autistic.
Tell us a little bit about what you do today in your career path with a family that has lots of different dynamics in them.
So I am a human Kaizen expert and an author. So human Kaizen, what I really do is I help make individuals and organizations better continuously. And we apply the concepts of Kaizen, which is the Japanese continuous improvement model that has been applied to engineering, manufacturing, software, all these other arenas, but we've completely ignored applying it to the most important part of any organization, which is the human resource, the individual people. And I'm very much an individualist as opposed to a collectivist. And I believe in individual choice and responsibility, and we can all choose to be better. Okay. Somebody who gets a diagnosis of autism or ADHD who just throw their hands up, oh, that's the way it is, and just go on the normal path. Or we can take the time, understand them, understand the dynamics around it, the biochemistry, what these kids need, and be able to work with them to help maximize their potential.
Sounds like you have certainly the credentials to do what you're doing, given your family dynamic.
Well, it's one of these weird things that when my littlest guy was diagnosed, that pushed me further along this path because my background is, I've got a background in psychology and economics. I was an applied physicist first. I've been an intelligence officer, world champion. So I've got all these different components. I'm very much like a human Swiss Army knife. But now I've directed and applied it more towards how do we be able to make individuals have the best possible growth curves in terms of doing the individual tiny steps, the smallest possible thing. Like the cover of my book has this really cool nonlinear growth curve because it is those micro decisions that we make 50,000 times a day that if we can make a handful of those better continuously, then we can move off on this path. I don't care if you're a neuronormal or if you're an individual with Asperger's or full-blown autism, ADHD, OCD, doesn't matter which one of the Scrabble letters you pull out for what you have, we can be a little bit better. And over time, with good effort and experience, what we can have and what they can experience and what they can contribute is absolutely, truly phenomenal.
Your oldest is 16, you said?
Almost 18.
Almost 18. Okay.
My middle one's almost 16.
Okay. And so thinking of leadership and thinking of, he's going to either take a path of secondary school or work program or something. How do we embrace children or young adults with those special needs into everyday living and job and school and things like that?
So one of the big things is that luckily my oldest found his school passion pretty early. I mean, he's on the high school robotics team, which has gone to nationals every single year. And he's their chief coder and has been doing coding with them since he was like a freshman. And this has been his fascination right along. So he was lucky in that he was able to find his passion, something that he has ikigai with. So it's something the world needs. It's something that he gets excited about, and there's demand and financial support for it. So he's got that path. So for him, it is a little bit easier than other people who don't have a good environment that like work-wise, school-wise, that they're going to be able to go along with. And being STEM guys in the technology fields, engineering and especially hard sciences, people who are on the spectrum are overrepresented. Because one thing about a lot of autistic kids is they literally have a checklist in their head that they go through. And so that translates directly into the engineering mindset. And after my son was diagnosed, I literally went through my class list in the physics department that I went through, where it's even more disproportionately represented. And I'm like, yep. They're on the spectrum, because back then we didn't talk about it. It wasn't really known. It's also become more prevalent. Right now, 1 out of 44 kids born is somewhere on the spectrum. And even 10 years ago, that was 1 out of 54. And you go back 25, 30 years ago, it was even worse. It was less prevalent than that. So it's become more and more prevalent. And so society needs to adapt to these, because these are not people who are weird. They just process a little differently. So the school system is not necessarily designed to maximize their performance. The school system is really designed to get people into the military or into the industrial age manufacturing. Yeah. And so the school systems need to evolve anyway for this. But kids who are on like this, they don't fit into the boxes quite as neatly. But once you can get them into the right environment and work, they completely outperform, because they can literally apply their entire brain to working on individual problems or situations. And what they're able to do is truly phenomenal.
Are there things that leaders should be aware of if they wanted to bring somebody who is on their team, to not have those biases, but to embrace their differences that are so special? What would that look like?
This is actually an evolution of leadership overall, because I don't think that it's a special needs thing, because each individual that's on your team has their individual talents, their individual weaknesses that they need to work on, their individual strengths, which is part of the reason why they're getting promoted up the ladder, is because of these things. They are able to be good contributors. And so the best leaders are able to look at those people, whether they're neuronormal or non-neuronormal, and be able to draw out the best from them. So it might be that somebody is incredibly good with mathematical ability, but their handwriting absolutely sucks, like this guy right here. All right. So, I literally, they almost failed me when I was a kid because my handwriting was so bad. And I told the principal, I was like 8 years old, that didn't matter, because eventually we're going to type everything and eventually we'll be able to just dictate it and the computer will write it.
And here we are doing that.
And that's exactly where we are. So, I'm not so concerned that some kids can't tie their shoes other than the neuromotor development that it helps with. I'm not so concerned that some kids, can't write cursive or things like this. There's other things. As you get into more leadership positions, there's a lot of flaws that have not been addressed. They might be compensatory, they might be too aggressive or too whatever. And so the leader needs to work with the individual on an individual basis to overcome some of the shortfalls and the flaws and to maximize the strengths within the individual and deploy them best for the organization. So in my opinion, that's not a a non-neuronormal, a special needs thing in any way, shape, or form. That's just good quality leadership.
Yeah.
And if we can expand our thinking to do that, it doesn't matter if somebody has an invisible disability like this. You can still use them and help them to become the best version of themselves and the best asset for the organization.
That's great that in the job, leaders should focus on the individual talents and areas where
but all too often it's checking the boxes, just like in school systems.
What can we do differently or better to get them past the interview stage? Because during an interview or during applying for a job, let's say, are they going to articulate, hey, by the way, X, Y, and Z? Maybe not. So what's your thought on that? How do they get past that interview stage? Because somebody who is not familiar with someone who is with Asperger's or autism, if they're not familiar with what those traits are or how to navigate that, they may just disqualify this person because they're having difficulties. Exactly.
And so one of the things is that we need to coach the students earlier on. This is how you go about interviewing. This is how you do things. So it might be slightly uncomfortable for you to do it, but with practice, it won't be as uncomfortable. Our students and young professionals need to have better feedback loops, better coaching, more awareness around this. So that's on, to me, I think career centers need to talk about how do you shake a hand? How do you interact with individuals? What's professional dress? Because that's gone by the wayside. So there's some coaching things there, and that to prepare the students to be able to be in that position. But it's also coming down to the interviewers. If you're going to be looking at talent to be joining your organization, you need to have a higher level of understanding than just checking the boxes of, do they have the degree? What's their GPA? What's their extracurriculars and all that? You need to actually have some coaching around. There are some of the most common things that you might see that might seem a little weird, but are indicative of non-neuronormal activity or things like that. The same way that when somebody's a hiring manager, they're taught, these are questions you're not allowed to ask. You can't ask, are you pregnant, or things like that. Here, step beyond that is, here's the questions you have to ask. Here's the questions you're not allowed to ask. Here's some things to be aware of. So a little more training around the management of it. And this comes on to an organizational level. And this is why human resources is so important, because when we talk about invisible disabilities, whether it is dyslexia, autism, anxiety, bipolar, all these things, this actually impacts a majority of the population in some capacity. In 2019, I did a talk for new college graduates, or 2020, I did the talk. 2019 is the data I used. And 40% of that year's graduating class had sought treatment or counseling for anxiety.
Wow.
Or some other neurological issue. 40% sought it, which means that you had at least half that many who didn't seek it, which means the majority of that cohort has issues that they're dealing with. You apply this across the board. Mental health and awareness is something that companies need to invest significant amount of time with, because you can make employees happier, you can make them more productive, you can reduce turnover, you can increase productivity, you can decrease sick days, all this sort of stuff by just starting to pay attention and give resources to these things. The disproportionate return is completely worth it.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned something really important, like at the Scouts. It's not just those who are different, because even young kids, young adults need to learn some of these life skills. And sometimes we assume that those are being done at home. Well, we don't know what the home dynamic is. We don't know what was available. If the parents are always working, or if there's one parent and they weren't raised that way, first generation, whatever.
Or maybe, the parent is ADHD. I was adult diagnosed ADHD. I mean, it's pretty obvious if you talk to me, but so I understand the constraints of it and how to maximize my performance within it. So, for example, short time sequences, setting a clock, turning off the internet so I don't have the distractions. I have learned these sort of things, but other people who haven't learned them, they might be in the wrong sort of job for them, where, having me be an accountant and looking at numbers all day long, because I've done some forensic accounting in the past, unless you hyper focus for that, that's going to be absolute torture, and it's going to be the worst possible position for somebody who needs to move and do and change and think like this. So having good understanding of your skill sets, your mindsets, and your weaknesses can allow people to gravitate towards the field that makes most sense for them. I saw a statistic that roughly 75% of Americans hate their job.
Yeah, that's pretty awful.
I guarantee you a good chunk of that is because there's a mental mismatch between their natural attitudes and capabilities and what they're doing for pay.
Absolutely. I mean, I see it with some of the career coaching I'm doing. They're like, I'm not really sure if this is for me, or, what's next and everything else. And they're just doing it for, just to have the job because they have to pay the bills. If you could name, because we talked about a little bit of it, but if you could name 3 skills that either HR or a leader should have with a young adult that has an invisible diversity, what would those be?
One of the biggest ones is empathy. Trying to comprehend the thought process of the kid, of the individual, is something important. So, for example, my youngest son was at scout camp this summer, and at the end of the camp, they're like, everything was great except for this one day, when they changed the schedule. We ended up having to do something at a different time, and my son ended up having a breakdown. That's because you did not follow the script. This is one of the reasons why people on the spectrum make such great engineers in a lot of capacities, because they literally have a mental checklist. They go from here to here to here to here. When my son was young, he would not read fiction because plot twists, anything not following the checklist, the plan that he has laid out, suddenly disrupts them. So one of the things that we've done is we've taught him to play the what if game. So, hey, it's your birthday, you want to go out to dinner. Where do you want to go? I want to go to Sunset Cafe. Okay. I'm going to want to go to Sunset. I want to have nachos. So he was already 2 steps down. Okay. What if we can't go to Sunset because they're closed? Oh, we'll go to Henry's. All right. So if not this one, then that one. Should we have a backup plan in case it's not Henry's? No, we're good. So having these, instead of checklist, having decision trees will allow them to be able to be flexible, and you need to pre-play it with the individual so that they understand. And this is actually a skill that I teach business owner clients in a lot of ways. Hey, you're planning on doing X. What if you can't do that? What's your backup plan if this supplier goes out of business, or they can't deliver these things on this time, or if your key person has a sickness, or your assistant can't come on in for 2 weeks because they break their leg? What if? And having this proactive planning in some capacities, the preliminary bit of a plan, gives them more flexibility and makes them more comfortable. It actually drives down anxiety in a lot of ways, which helps with some of the other mental issues. But allowing or teaching the hiring managers, the leaders to play this what if game allows them to be able to communicate better and allows the individual on the spectrum to be able to understand it's not the end of the world if the stapler breaks, or if that thing disrupts our process, we can adjust and adapt and overcome. So that's by far one of the biggest ones. Combine that with empathy, so understanding and teaching them how to think that way, but also understanding some things could set them off. It might be too bright. So my kid was also had horrible eyesight, it turns out, and had sensory issues. It was just overwhelming. So using the weighted vest, using the earphones, we ended up getting him glasses so he could see, because before that he was basically a drunk, crazy toddler in Vegas, was what it was like having him in school. But once we were able to start removing some of the distractions and focusing, and sometimes they need coping mechanisms. Sometimes they need to be able to walk away. Sometimes they need a fidget spinner. The school systems actually now allow kids to chew gum a lot more than they used to back in the day when dinosaurs roamed the earth when I was in school. So that all these little, I don't want to call them, I don't even know what to call them, but these little things around the edges. You're not going to suddenly have deterioration of Lord of the Flies situation by allowing a kid to tap or to be able to chew gum. It's not the end of the world doing that. Yeah, it's not the traditional, we need to stay totally within this box. It's not a rebellious behavior. It is coping mechanisms that allow them to be better and not disrupt the entire classroom.
So I want to move into, let's talk about your book. So tell us the name of your book.
So it's called Everyday Excellence. It's a daily guide to growing. And it's really designed as a multivitamin for life. And I say that because if you look at our lives, we've got our personal health, our physical health, our mental health, our emotional and spiritual health. We've got our nutrition, we've got our occupation, our communication, our relationships, whether it's with our significant other, our children, our friends, work. We've got all these different things going on in our world. And guess what? We're not at our best in every single one, every single day.
That's right.
And if it's crunch time at work and you're working 60 hours a week and you're sitting there, eating Pop-Tarts and Mountain Dew while you're doing it, guess what? You're not going to be in the best physical shape after a couple of weeks of that. Or, you're dealing with something with the kids. And so work takes a back step for a while. I mean, I saw this with my friends who had cancer. That work was not the important thing in their life at that point, or the relationship with your spouse or what have you. So we've got all these different things going on. We've got distractions, we've got everything, and we're not at our best. So it's just like if your diet's not the best, you might be not getting enough calcium or not enough vitamin D or what have you. So we supplement it. We take a multivitamin each day, and that's what this is meant to do. It's 2 to 5 minutes every single morning. There's a quote from somebody, could be Mahatma Gandhi, could be Rosa Parks, could be Derek Jeter, could be Dr. Seuss. And then there's discussion and analysis around it. And the person reading it is going to find within that what they need at that point.
Oh, that's great.
Because every single day I'll talk about multiple different things, the physical health, mental health, the relationships, and give different examples so people can see themselves in it or interpret something that's important for them at that point. But one of the big differences between my book and all the other daily readers, the self-help books, is that unless you make changes, nothing changes. So there's an action item every single day to help reinforce the lessons. And those action items might be something as emotionally intense as writing down on a piece of paper all the reasons why you're pissed off with someone and reading them out loud and crossing them off one by one. I forgive you for the X. I forgive you for Y. I forgive you for Z. And doing that. That one sucks. That one's hard. I did that one a couple of weeks ago. Or it might be something as simple as smiling at 5 people today. Because there's all sorts of neurological and biochemical changes when you smile. And because of mirror neurons, when I smile at you, you want to smile back. And all of a sudden, I have now given you the gift of health because your cortisol levels drop, so you're less stressed, and it's slowing down the aging process. And I've increased the serotonin in your system, which makes you stand up a little bit stronger, a little bit more confident, a little bit more intelligent, actually, for the next few minutes.
Yeah.
So me smiling at you is a gift to you and the world.
Yeah.
And so having those little action items reinforce the teaching, they make micro changes in the individual, and it makes them slightly better. And when you compound this over days, weeks, months throughout the entire year, the person can end up being in a completely different and better place overall.
Wow.
And it's sustainable.
You mentioned about smiling, and it reminded me, I was doing a talk recently on imposter syndrome. And one of the things that I mentioned is that if you can remember when you're in that little spin cycle of your, that inner voice, that inner critic, if you start to think about things, a cue of that's going to make you smile, it'll take you out of that vortex of being miserable.
Another thing, writing is great because you get the haptic feedback, and it's also very visual, and it takes it out of your head, so it's no longer around there. Literally start writing down, I deserve this because, and just start brain dumping it out on all the things that you've done that put you in the position to be in that position, because they wouldn't have promoted you or hired you if they didn't think you had the capabilities to do it. So are you absolutely ready for that position yet? No, well, nobody is. That's why it's a promotion. You're in a different space now, but you prove that you've got the capacity for it. So reinforce that for yourself, whether it's writing it down, whether it's, talking it out, whether it's recording it on your phone, whether it's just, a real quick, send yourself a postcard. You got this, kid.
Yeah.
Because
little self-affirmation is great.
Yeah, but something like a postcard is cool because you mail it off, and then like a couple of days later it shows up. And we don't get postcards anymore.
No, we barely get letters.
We get, junk emails, and, the people calling you where you've been trying to reach you about your car's extended warranty. But a physical letter or postcard, that means something again.
Yeah.
And so sending it to yourself is you talking to you in 2 to 5 days and reminding you got this.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. I was reading a book. Well, actually, it was my mother's dissertation when she was going for a doctorate. And inside the book was this handwritten letter. Now, my mother, unfortunately, I inherited my mother's poor handwriting. So it took me a little bit of time to figure out some of the words. It was a letter written from her to herself, from her parents. And it was so cool to see. We're proud of you and all of these things. And it's just, that was such a great exercise that she did. I had not seen it before. So just opening it up.
And let's
today.
take that and now apply that to managers and leaders. That handwritten note, that little voicemail, the little thing, I'm proud of you. You can do this. I know you got it. That is worth so much to somebody.
Yeah, it's like gold.
Doubting or questioning or having a bad day. It's just that little, I got you. You got this.
Yeah,
sort of
exactly.
thing that pays huge dividends.
Yeah.
But we're so busy, checking the boxes and filling out the TPS reports and all that they don't actually do the management stuff of, hey, what can I do to help you?
So 2 questions about the book. When did you start writing this book? When was
I started writing this book when I was a little kid. Now, in the formal process of sitting down and doing it, because there's experiences, there's things I've learned over my entire life that influence this. But the entire process began last March. I believe it was the 24th. I was down in my weight room, throwing around a kettlebell, listening to Jocko Willink talk and blasting some Black Sabbath, which is sort of ironic because Black Sabbath is Jocko Willink's favorite band, I found out later. And Jocko makes a comment on excellence is a habit, quoting Aristotle. I'm like, excellence is a habit, habits that you practice every single day. All of a sudden it went on. Everyday excellence. And I had this vision of the structure of the book with the quote, discussion, and then action item. I literally put down the kettlebell, ran upstairs, brain dumped out for like 15, 20 minutes of structuring what I want to do and how I want to do it all. Went back downstairs, finished my workout because you finish what you start, and then came up and spent the next 2 hours putting together the basics of the book. And then using some habit stacking techniques from James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, and just brute strengthening it and just being so committed to it, I was able to write the 700+ page book in under 6 months.
That's pretty impressive. I've been told by a mentor, write a book. And I said, I don't know. And he says, even if it sucks, the second one will be so much better. I'm like, wait a minute, I haven't even started the first one. So,
You
but
know
it's
what?
been,
What I did is every single day I'd write 2-page days of the book.
yeah,
And even if I then, threw out 75% of what I wrote that day was crap, didn't matter. I still made forward progress.
that's
And
pretty
then
awesome.
I'd write again later in the day when I had time, after work, in the evenings. It was a work in progress. And after about a month or two, I was really getting into it. And then it was like just cranking
Very
and doing
cool.
it. And I was passionate and involved. And so it was like, hey, it was the quote of, I get to go run 3 miles today to go get ready for a race in the future. That was what this was. Hey, I get to go do this now. Bang. And so I was looking forward to it for most of the time. There were a couple of days I was like, oh, I don't wanna, but you just suck it up and you sit down and you start and you write one word. And then that one word becomes one sentence. That one sentence becomes a paragraph. And then all of a sudden you got the day done and it's like, oh, I guess I'll write day 2 because that's what I'm supposed to do. And so that's one of the overcoming the humps and moving in the right direction in a lot of ways. And so with individuals who have issues, like I see this, one of my friends has very bad clinical depression. She's struggling right now because it was right about a year ago when her mom passed on. So do the minimum that you can. So you got up, you had a glass of water, good start, okay? You need a text of a spoon because you're out of emotional spoons. I sent her a picture of the tick screaming spoon. She laughed. All right, forward progress. Okay, brushed your teeth and ate a Pop-Tart. It's not all organic, great food and all that, but something. It's progress. And so by doing these little things, in a couple of days, we'll be able to get her out of this.
Yeah, that's really great. Mental health is so, it's so prevalent right now. So anything we could do to support anyone else, obviously professionals need to be involved when needed, but
well, at this
important.
point, that's not professional. That's just a friend saying, hey.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's not just professional, but as a friend that we can support each other when we're going through these times is important too. So Joe, what's next for you? What's your vision for some of the work that you're doing? What is it you see, if you can name a gap or something that you'd really like to focus on, what would that be?
So one of the things that I'm doing is there's lots of gaps out there, actually. There's lots of things where I can continue to help people. And one of the things you talked about earlier was normalizing discussions around this, normalizing seeking assistance, normalizing creating networks of support in some ways. So I'm actually on a mission. I'm using July 1st as the start of the year because that was my birthday. And over the next 12 months, I'm going to reach out in some capacity, positively impact and help 100 million people. I don't care if it's podcasts like this, articles that I write for magazines or newspapers, radio programs I'm on, TV, people buying my book, that's great, that buys my beer, people going to the website, speeches that I do, 100 million people being positively impacted in some capacity. Because we all know the story or analogy of the butterfly flapping its wings and creating a tsunami, a world away. Well, if we can have 100 million little positive butterflies where we have a slight better influence and they can make a slightly better choice or do something to help somebody else out that day or not make a really bad negative decision. 100 million people impacted like that will then ripple tremendously and we'll be able to see, we'll be able to feel and experience a positive movement from that. So that is my mission over this 12-month period to positively impact in some capacity 100 million people. And then that mission is going to grow in terms of the reach and how I can impact more and more people over time.
I love that. That is really great. Well, hopefully.
So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this mission and some of my insight to be able to hopefully reach and impact some people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you're on your way. So, and what is is there an end to this mission of 100 million? 1 year, you said, right?
Yeah, that's this year. And then in a couple of years, it'll be 250, a couple of years after that, 500 million. And who knows how far we can take it.
Who knows, right? Exactly. Well, Joe, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I wish you all the best with your book, with your mission, especially, and all the best to you and your family. I hope your children are succeeding. They have an amazing father to help them navigate through this world. And good luck to you.
Awesome, Michelle. Thank you. Be excellent and grow today.
Thank you again for listening. We'll be back soon with a brand new episode of the Heart Inspired podcast. Until then, I'm your host, Michelle Delgado. I welcome you to support the show by rating us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. To learn more about HeartMetrics Consulting, book a strategy call by visiting the website at heartmetrics.com.